anything that's regulatory based has unintended consequences. And it could be manufacturing costs, right? So again, on the lender side, I don't know what the audience is, but like the cost to manufacture alone went up significantly. There is a very specific appeal to our industry that's aspirational. Because it creates the opportunity. And I think real estate is one of the most amazing opportunities that you have in the United States for the amount of money you need to put up versus the income you can earn if you decide to upskill yourself and take this seriously.
Real estate agents, are you looking to acquire clients consistently to grow your business and income for a great lifestyle? Well, this is Dave Finale, and I'm here to bring you the Real Estate Skill Builder broadcast, Real Estate Talk TGIF, brought to you by Real Estate Skill Builder and the Modern Agent team. As I said, this is Real Estate Talk TGIF, brought to you by Real Estate Skill Builder and also now the Align team as well as Modern Agents. Leo, thanks so much for coming on. I always ask everybody the same question when they come on, so I'm not going to be any different with you. The question is, what does TGIF stand for?
Thank goodness it's Friday. You tell me.
You're really close, Leo. I want to tell you that not everybody gets it right. It's thank God it's finale. You know, my broadcast, my thing. So, you know, what the hell, right? Again, thanks so much for coming on. I'm really excited because you are an icon in the industry. You are, as I said, a great communicator because there's no BS with you. You come on, you actually get ahead of things, which is something that I am so grateful for, being in the company that you are the CEO for. But first, before we get into the stuff that's going on today, talk to me about your past, your journey. I mean, you've been on a lot of broadcasts on TV, etc. But we don't talk about your journey and what it all means to everybody and how it appeals. So go ahead, please tell me.
So I'll give you the nickel version, but I got licensed at 19. While I was in college, I went on to sell close to 4,000 homes over 16 years. 2010, I was the number one KW team in the world, transaction count. And for like a 4 or 5 year run, I was 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the company. So I love systems. I love doing more with less. I just love the process. I like tweaking and I like scaling. In 2012, I co-founded a debt fund as a reaction to the shifts in legislation change after Dodd-Frank, CFPB,
right.
TILA, disclosures, ability to pay, which, by the way, is like very full circle in the sense of in chaos and disruption that's massive come great opportunity. We can circle back on that later on in the call if you want to. And then as we were building that, we had a need for public record data, which took us on this like unintended, side quest that accidentally created the opportunity for Remine. And then Remine was the hardest thing. Myself, my wife, everyone involved in the business that was grinding and traveling all over the world, country, went on this journey. We raised a bunch of private equity, learned all kinds of new words and experiences, which was pretty full circle because now I get to lead a great organization with a great platform that touches all parts of my background. But, it's one of those things about life where now it feels very sequential and one step led to the next one. But sometimes in the middle, it feels messy and confusing and 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But the one thing I'll say is I'm truly a practitioner, right? So I'm one of you guys. I still hold a broker's license, which I think I'm the only CEO of a publicly traded company in the industry that actually did this. And not like I sold 5 homes and decided to switch to corporate. Like I did this. The vast majority of my adult life has been being a practitioner. And I don't think it's changed one bit, right? Like, the forms we use, I looked at the rough drafts and said, hey, let's change these words. Let's like this is my stuff. Like, I love this stuff.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to follow different things. And as I said, I first became aware of you when you presented Remine. And, it was like when we were at this meeting and we're talking about you after you had left. And I was always the antagonizer, I think, of the group when I was talking about technology. And someone looked at me and says, what do you think? And I said, holy crap. I mean, if we don't do this, we're stupid. And of course, that's way back when, and things are just going really well. That's still a great product, and it is a great product. So you talked about
that's a cool experience to actually have an idea, birth it to the world, and then it exists past you. It's like your kid went to college, and it's like, hey, I like a really cool part of the journey is I don't go a day without somebody to tell me how to use it, and like unintended uses that I didn't dream up at the beginning when we were developing it. So it's a cool part of the journey.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, I mean, we've all done things we get to look back. I built a lot of buildings that I get to drive by, and hopefully the people that have them hasn't messed up. This morning, as a matter of fact, there's a street that I built 12 homes in, and I drove down that street today, and I said, wow, those trees have really grown. You know, so I did it in the 90s. So that was a kind of a similar experience. You mentioned the word disruption, right? And I want to talk about that because it seems like there's been a lot of disruptions in our industry over the years. You mentioned Dodd-Frank. Well, you know, not similarly, but also at the end of the 90s, we had this thing about, at least in the state of New Jersey, this thing about agency and describing agency and this consumer information statement where in New Jersey we have to get that signed. And I know it's all over the place. And now that has changed a little bit. But we have a great disruption, and there's been lots of disruptions. You could say that Zillow was a disruption when it first came in. The internet, we've all heard of that. I think it's been in all the papers. It's been kind of a disruption, and now we have this disruption. How would you say that the NAR thing and what we're going through, the changes from August 17th on, how does that compare to other disruptions that we've experienced over the last 30 years?
Great question. So I think disruptions tend to come in two flavors. One is an organic kind of evolutionary one, which is like the less painful version, right? Because like, for example, I actually talk about the two disruptions that have been massive in real estate since I got in. One, the internet, and two, mobile. And I'll unpack it for you. So I'm old enough in real estate years where literally the contracts were white, yellow, pink, and we pressed hard.
Yeah,
and then the fax machine chewed it up and made me livid because I had to handwrite it in blue ink, and I have shit handwriting.
Yeah.
And the internet, like I would drive to the real estate office to log into the portal that like did this on the screen and then spit out some paper, and then I schedule an appointment. Do you like these? You know, because I had to physically hand them the papers. We'd circle them. We would call on the landline. I'd wait for a call back. And the process took like if you were going to show houses on a Saturday, we were prepping Wednesday.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
And the internet, high-speed internet, where I could log in from my house to an MLS was a game changer. Game changer. Because it's like, hey, this listed Friday night at 7 p.m. I can show it Saturday if it's vacant. It's on a lockbox. And then the second one was when that internet went into my phone, right? Because I remember driving around with papers that I printed out on MapQuest, which, by the way, was terribly unsafe for everyone following you in the car or in front of you. And so those two accelerated the real estate process. And this is something I think about a lot and talk about a lot, Dave. Real estate is a finite game. And what I mean by that is there's anywhere between 4 to 7 million transactions, depending on the year, based on supply, demand, and interest rates. Some years is 4 million, some years is 4.5, 5, 6, 7. And again, you asked me 30 years. It's a very specific timeline.
Yep.
This year is going to be 3.9 to 4 million. 2011 was 7 million. 08 was 4 million. 2006 was 7 million, right? Like, and we can go back to the early 90s after SNL. And so what I've seen is disruption compresses the amount you can do. So now that same example from 2002, a property can list on the MLS, it syndicates to portals, the consumer can like it, you get a trigger, they can actually schedule the showing depending on the MLS, you're with showing time directly with you. You guys could be at that property in an hour, or you could be at the property, FaceTime, showing them the house. You can then write up the contract in .loop or SkySlope in your phone and digitally sign it and deliver a full offer in 60 minutes from it going active.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was not physically possible 20 years ago, right?
No, that was 6 days.
But it didn't, like, when did the internet, like, so September 9th, we're getting this iPhone 16, right? It just announced. The V1 of the iPhone was a toy, right? Because the standard was BlackBerry. It was the professional standard. It's what the
Right.
government used. It's like what executives use. I could type on it. And when I remember when the iPhone 1 came out, I was like, that's a cool, like, nerdy toy with good UI and UX. And you know I'm a nerd, so I'm seeing that in the most complimentary way possible. But you boil that frog over 16 iterations. I actually describe this as the remote to my life. Literally, like my wallet, this is it. I don't need anything else. It starts my cars. It's my credit card. It has my health insurance card.
Yep.
It has soon our driver's licenses. There's states that are working on it, which, by the way, I prefer. Right. Funny enough, I was on my kids' back to school night, and my phone died, and I got the craziest anxiety I've ever gotten because I started texting my wife from my Apple Watch because it's got its own plan. Then my watch died, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to find her to get back home to get in the car. I can't unlock the car. So there are the counterproductive parts about this kind of centralized moment we live in. But and I remember the original question. I'm not that
I know.
So there is sequential process where we all collectively caught up, right? Like my 81-year-old dad and 76-year-old mom both have iPhones, and we share videos. Like I was at my son's jujitsu class and I was sending my dad live videos, and I sent it to my brother, right? Like that's like they all came with us.
Right. They're all there with you. Right.
So I've lived through two changes that from one day to the next changed how we operated. Because the two changes I gave you were sequential and like, incremental evolution.
Mm-hmm.
I turned back and looked 10, 20 years in the past, and they were like life-changing. But the first one was in financing, right? When post-financial crisis, like Tilla, Dodd-Frank, CFPB literally put entire companies out of business, right? For a couple of reasons. It leveled the playing field, full disclosure. So people that had business practices that weren't very fair disappeared. And that's a good thing of regulation.
Right.
The other thing it did, and this is the part that people don't understand, especially as the market shift, is, anything that's regulatory based has unintended consequences. And it could be manufacturing costs, right? So again, on the lender side, I don't know what the audience is, but like the cost to manufacture alone went up significantly, right? Like there's a fixed dollar amount between regulatory compliance and new processes that cost money, right? We don't know what we don't know about the manufacturing cost increase because of the enforcement of rules and the audit capabilities. And like, hey, the enforcement of these settlement acts, it's going to be on the broker. It's going to be, it's like, do you have all the paper, the electronic, do you have all the records, right? Like, just like we have certain regulations, and there's new regulatory expenses coming that we don't actually, I still don't know what the incremental cost to manufacture a deal is yet.
Exactly.
And again, I'm just drawing the parallel of what happened in mortgage, right? The companies that couldn't figure this stuff out went out of business, right? Yeah. And the ones that did took a disproportionate share of the market. Rocket Homes, right? UWM. There were companies that took off. Like, again, nobody asked for it. It happened, but it was dramatic, right? That was the first one I saw. The second one I witnessed was COVID. Some companies got caught flat-footed, didn't know how to evolve, and died. And then others took off, which EXP is the best example of. Yeah. But again, that's just in the real estate. Like, I think what COVID did to business and life was an eventuality over a 10 or 20-year period, much more like the mobile phone.
Right.
We were already moving into a, like, why do we drive long distances? Why do we, like, right. We now have, like, the internet was monumental, but so was high-speed internet. Like, the fact that you're streaming this live, and I'm in my home office and you're in New Jersey, is like, that's a evolution thing from high-speed internet, right? So it's like we got internet in the 2000s. We got high-speed internet not that long ago, where I have 600-700 megs up and down sitting in my house. Like that used to be like a crazy T-line Comcast plug this big that would plug into your office building.
Right.
So what I think will happen, and again, for the people that looked at August 17th as the end date, are looking at it all wrong. It's the start date.
No, absolutely.
Right? There's a start date of all the unintended consequences that I can't articulate because I don't know what they are yet, right? And the additional liability and litigation that's coming, right? the proliferation of new business models. So this is the one part I want to clearly articulate, since that's the props you gave me on one of my skill sets, is on the seller side. And again, I just did a talk with Renee Rodriguez, who wrote Amplify Your Influence. And he explained very clearly how the brain will fill in gaps when there's no information. And that's where I think a lot of agents are confused, right? Because they're like, well, I can't do X anymore. And they go to like a blank slate in their mind of what's possible. And that's actually when a lot of fear and confusion comes in.
Right.
And I actually give everybody the advice of, if we have the perfect parallel, it's called the seller.
I agree.
And this is what I mean. So first of all, imagine going on a listing appointment and saying, hey, Dave, when we get the offer, I'll decide what I'm going to charge you. Like, that's just sounds crazy. Sounds crazy. But that's effectively what we've been doing with buyer agency, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're both. All three homes are townhouses built in 2008 that are 3 bedrooms, 2 bath. Literally, the only difference is like hardwood floors and the countertops. All three could be offering a different call, right? You render the same service to a buyer, same amount of energy, time. Now you're just saying, hey, this is my fee, independent of what's being offered. And we have the ability to have the optionality to accept, reject, negotiate all the terms of the contract, right? And what I also say to folks is it's skill-based and training-based, because you have to ask, right? And what is probably not talked about enough, and I'll say it because it's going to proliferate. You said 30 years, and that's about, I've been in the business 2.5 decades. So let's just use that time frame. In that time frame that I've been a licensed practitioner, anytime I went on a listing appointment, I was competing with other companies, but also business models. The entire time I've been in the business, there has been a flat fee option.
Yeah.
There has been a menu of service option.
Absolutely.
And there's been a range of percentage options that, fall from white glove to discount. And it's not right or wrong. It is a service matched to a consumer and the service they want and when they'll pay for. And this is the last part that probably is not talked about enough, but I'm trying to make sure I articulate it, is statistically, every year, there's a percentage of sellers who choose to do it themselves.
Yeah, they do.
And it tends to be between 5 to 12, 13% every year. And that number goes up and down based on supply. The years we have the least amount of for sale by owners are the ones with the most supply, because if there's 18 months of inventory in 2009, we were not trying for sale by owner, right? You wanted it exposed to as many eyeballs as possible. But if you're in a market that has 17 offers per listing, the ability to FSBO is better than in years that aren't, because it's all about exposure and eyeballs, right?
Exactly.
What I'm now saying to people is take my analogy one step further and fully expect to compete with different business models on the buy side, right? There is going to be a percentage of buyers who truly choose to be unrepresented, and you'll have to deal with that. There are going to be companies that pop up who are going to say, hey, we'll do it for a flat fee, whether that's contract review or showings. There'll be some that say it's a menu of services, and then some will expect anything you've seen on the seller side. And this is where I invite agents to just study stuff. Like, whatever you've competed with on the seller side, expect to see it on the buy side.
Right.
And again, I've done a lot of media recently, and the gotcha questions like, Leo, what's the new fee going to be? And you know what my answer is?
Go ahead.
The fee will be what the fee is, because the fee is set by market demand, and it's capitalism. And I do expect the fee to vary: supply, demand, price point, customer wants and needs, sophistications. Like you said, you develop real estate. A real estate developer is a different consumer than a first-time home buyer who needs a down payment assistance, right? The services rendered by you and the time invested in all the possible customers you can offer a service to vary greatly. I was getting buyer representation fees above average numbers if I worked with a developer who I sourced something off market, which was very different than something on the market, which is very different than an institutional seller who would pay me, a flat fee to sell fully renovated, repaired, staged property that curb appeal. Like in my business, when I practiced, had a variety of pricing schedules for different services rendered. right? So I invite people to be open-minded, have a lot of grace. I'm by no means advocating any one particular one. The lens that I look through as we build rules and systems for you guys is legal, ethical, and enforceable, right? Because the reality is, in capitalism, if someone produces a service or product that does not create a net margin that's acceptable to survive, over time, that business goes out of business. And on the other side of the spectrum, if a business chooses to price it above where the market is willing to pay, you also go out of business, right? And again, forget real estate, it's just business. So what I believe will happen is the new fee will emerge between a service provider who is willing to provide a service for a service that the consumer is willing to pay for. And it's that binary.
I don't know if it's suffice it to say that our business has been, we list sellers and we bring buyers. Well, like, I think you said it, is we're going to list sellers and we're listing buyers, and the same process, so to speak, right, that we use to list buyers and get listings is the same thing we're going to use to get buyers, where there might be a menu of services for them. As you said, like, you can have the agreement on a single property. You can do it for time. You can do it for geographic location. So you can do it for a lot of
like what we do with sellers, right? Like I worked with sophisticated investors who are like, listen, I don't want to list it on the MLS, but like, I'll give you an open listing, or I will agree to a buyer compensation paid by me if you bring me a buyer and I'm willing to sell. Like that's happened for the decades I've been in the business, right? Like,
yeah, right.
In the investment world, I don't want to disrupt my tenants, but hey, I'm game, and I'll sign something to the extent to protect your compensation and your work if you deliver what we're talking about.
So I don't want to simplify this, but it really is kind of simple. Where, like I said, you're going to list sellers, you're going to list buyers. Isn't it a similar skill set?
No, it's not the similar skill set. It's the same skill set. So this is where I'm, again, clearly articulating what I'm seeing post 10 days, right? Like, I think tomorrow is exactly 2 weeks, so 14 days. I'm seeing a tale of two cities. I'm seeing, again, and I'll say it clearly, I believe the plaintiffs' attorneys don't give a goddamn about consumers.
I 100%
they saw paycheck and they went for it, because if they did, hell, they should have given the $700 million to first-time homebuyer funds if they really do care about consumers, how they say. But no, they're taking the disproportionate lion's share, and that's for another conversation. But that's the most calling the kettle black, where they take the vast majority and don't support the people they're supposed to represent. But the reality is, I'm seeing folks that say, okay, because this is the question I ask people, and I say this a lot. Life is 10% what happens and 90% how you react to it, period. And so we now have a new set of rules. My question to real estate practitioners is, do you still want to help families buy and sell real estate? If the answer is yes, there's just a new set of rules, right? So forget your emotions, how you feel about it. And so this is where I've seen the tale of two cities. In the last 2 weeks, I've seen agents go, okay, I'm going to learn it. I'm going to do it. And some people have come up and said, wow, this actually is forcing a conversation where I get to explain my value proposition. And like you said, maybe now only work with serious customers that aren't wasting my time, right? There's always unintended consequences that you could look at the positives for, right? So again, I'm not saying I think this was good for consumers or the industry or anything, because I'm clearly not saying that. But the folks who are saying, okay, I'm gonna operate under the new rules, and some of the benefits that they're seeing is, discerning who's serious and who's not, and having very real conversations. Where I think, and again, I would say a percentage of the folks are like, game on, I'm well versed in it, I'm gonna dive in with both feet. And then I'm seeing the other ones who I'm describing as the character from Inside Out, the blue one, where it's like, this isn't fair, this shouldn't have happened, the defense dropped the ball, we weren't protected. And I say, I don't disagree with any of that. But do you still want to serve families? And if you want to, are you prepared to change your processes, learn the new scripts, have the proper paperwork, be prepared to compete in a different manner that you've been used to? like systemically and step by step, a lot of things changed. And so it's the folks who are willing to shift and adapt. And so this is, I think there will be breakage, real breakage at the beginning of the folks who will not adapt. And I think it's fully a mental decision they make. And then the other people, the other folks, I'll remind everybody of in 12 months, right? Next summer, the agents who get their license won't even know what we're talking about. Like
Exactly.
they're going to say, you put people in your car without a signed agreement, knowing what you're going to make? That sounds crazy. Right. And I've even said, like, I honestly think 12 months from now, when I remind you of like the amount of noise and chaos and confusion, it's going to feel like when we were wiping down groceries during COVID.
It's going to be like, what are snow tires? So that shows my age a little bit, right?
Well, no, I had snow tires, but you're right. I haven't heard that in a very long time.
So, okay. So do you, and there's no nice way to put this. I think we get rid of the hobbyists and we continue and build professionalism. Would what we hope will happen?
Yeah. So again, there is a very specific appeal to our industry that's aspirational. Because it creates the opportunity. And I think real estate is one of the most amazing opportunities that you have in the United States for the amount of money you need to put up versus the income you can earn if you decide to upskill yourself and take this seriously.
Right.
And again, I'm speaking as a founder who's raised lots of money, and
yep,
I know the differences in creating real EBITDA in other sectors of the world, right? Like, I truly think it's a beautiful opportunity, especially for the folks that are heart driven and like working with people and doing something that actually has a very real reward, right? Because you get to put a family in a home, and that's an awesome experience. Like, that's why I've been in it my whole life. I don't think anyone gets their license to be a hobbyist. It might be an unintended consequence where they didn't have enough skills and or savings so they could do it full time, because the part time to full time is a hard trek. I have plenty of examples of people who did it part time for like a year or two and then saved up and sequentially pivoted into it, which again, amazing. And I mean, I did it. I was 19. I was still waiting tables for the first year that I was licensed, right? So I do think that it'll probably upskill the entire industry, which is a positive in the sense of like belt and suspenders, everything. Just fully, like, I'm all about transparency. So anything that creates more transparency to the consumers in the industry, I think is a positive. But I'm also hyper aware that it's a very aspirational business. And there's lots of folks who, I mean, the time and energy to pass the test is not small. And so I don't think anybody comes in and saying, I want to be a hobbyist. It's more like, I really want to do this. And then they realize how hard it is, right? Because that's, I always have said, the appeal of real estate is very inaccurate with what it takes to succeed. The amount of times I've heard someone say, I want to get into real estate because of the flexibility, the high income, the lifestyle. And any agent I've met who's actually super successful is very disciplined, like the opposite of flexibility. And they work 60 to 80 to 100 hours a week to get to a level in their business where they can build systems and leverage and everything else, where you have to invest a season of your life into getting to where you need to be. And again, that actually statement, I think, goes for any entrepreneurial journey or any, part of your life that you choose to become masterful at, right? Like if you read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point and stuff, it's like, it takes 10,000 hours, that has been studied to get very good at something. And by the way, our industry is no different.
Do you think our industry gets better because of this? Do you think, so look, let's look at it this way, right? So people get into business, as you said, for flexibility and the income they can make, and also now lifestyle, so on and so forth. And what happens is when they get into the business, they say, oh shit, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought I could go along and show a house and write a contract. And I didn't know I had to do this follow up or make this phone call and stuff. And there's an expression that I love that I heard a little while ago, where you can't judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, right?
It's a great one. Yeah.
And people are getting into the business to fish and not to climb trees. They're getting into business to sell real estate to make that income, the glamour life that we see on TV, right? A lot of people talk about that. And they're not willing to do the work. Do you think the appeal of the business, do you think what people need to know before they get into business will be more readily available? They'll see it more now than we did in the past.
So back to the earlier question you asked me of shifting, right? Like the organic ones are
Yeah.
like evolutionary, the natural order of things. In which, by the way, like the release of a product can be very quickly, right? Meaning like ChatGPT, right? The adoption speed and kind of daily active use is unprecedented. It is mobile and internet level, right? Like I've heard some people say large language models is fire. I'm like, I don't know that we'll ever get a second fire in our species, but I will put large language models up there with mobile and internet, because the fast pace of adoption and also the augmentation of who you are, right? Like I use it every single day. It's open almost exclusively on my browser. I almost ask it more questions than I ask Google now, right? And the return and output is that I can do more things in less time. And so there is that tipping point of a natural change. This one is an unnatural change. So I'm being very clear about that. Right? It's a artificial, meaning it was forced, right? It was not a survival of the fittest, which is what happens when opportunities shift, right? And new technology emerges, and the adopters or the early adopters have a disproportionate advantage. Like this was a forced on this day, coupled with ambiguous instructions.
That's right.
Because, and we're clearly seeing it because we're interpreting it differently. We, EXP, chose a business decision that went past the settlement. And that's where, apparently I ruffled a bunch of feathers. But guess what? As an enterprise, we can collectively look and say, we think the puck is going there, like in the next 6-12 months. And the option of not listening is we piss off some serious stakeholders, meaning the federal government, and potentially open up liability for more litigation. And so we are going to make a business decision that we think is agent and consumer centric, right? Mm-hmm. And some people are taking a different position, which is completely their right. And so this creates confusion and this moment. And again, this is where I'm very aware that, like, again, tying it to other events, one thing is a legislative rule change that we all have to abide by. And so that creates a messy middle. And then there will be a new normal because water always finds the lowest point in the room and all that kind of physics stuff. So it's too early to tell, in my personal opinion, what all the intended and unintended consequences will be. I'm always hoping for more transparency and to level up the practitioner level and the consumer experience. But only time will tell, because I also think historically, if we look at regulatory change, it's not always the outcome they want for the consumer.
No. I think it rarely is.
And if you look historically over a 50 or 100-year period, it normally drives aggressive consolidation where the bigger get bigger and the smaller don't get to survive.
No, exactly. So, all right. So we all understand, I think we all understand what we see in front of us, the difficulties that are proposed to us that we have to deal with, right? And then there's always going to be positives and negatives. I believe the positives to this industry is that it's going to help make people level up more and wake up more to what they really need to do. I mean, we've heard this phrase since last October or whatever the decision came out, that people were going to have to start bringing value. We hear that phrase. It's two words I hear. Well, you got to bring value. I got to show my value. Hey, you know what? Stop worrying about showing your value and just do a great job for the consumer. There's your value, right? And I think that's a positive. And I think I really don't see many negatives to what we're doing as we evolve into the new rules, the new normal, et cetera. Do you see any negatives to the changes? I believe is a lot of positives to our industry.
Yeah. So I think that goes a lot to how you're wired and how you view the world, right? I think any opportunity creates any change there is an opportunity to
Yep.
find.
Yep.
Where I'll tell you, I'm worried, and I see stuff at scale that bothers me, is where, agents are saying or choosing to like not show a property because, compensation is not either being advertised or offered upfront, which, by the way, that's the seller's choice. I think where people need to really focus is that this is all about the consumer, right? Like, this is my personal opinion. You now need a buyer representation agreement signed. That buyer is fully qualified up to X. It is your fiduciary responsibility to show them anything and everything available in their post. Period, and stop right there. Because I don't care if the listing agent said, we're not offering compensation. That is absolutely no different than if you see a house listed for X and your buyer wants to offer below list.
This is something you said recently too. Is you've got to bring forth strategies and negotiation with what everything thinks, but that's part of our job. So I mean, so what?
Because where I get worried is agents who are
I agree.
unintentionally, this is the word I'll use,
right?
Saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, like you're willing to pay me X. Let's only look at properties that offer compensation, right? Like, this is the reality. Like, a property that's listed for X and you want to offer below list, you want to ask for a 90-day rent back or a home of sale contingency, or you want to ask for the hot tub in the back that's not in the conveyables. These are not part of the advertised home for sale.
Right.
And anyone who's done this more than once, like, how many times have you gotten something that was not advertised?
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's part of your strategies, right? It's part of the options that you bring to the buyer and to the seller at the same time.
Yeah. So like, that's, again, very specific answer. I'm worried that the process will hurt consumers by folks that are either uninformed, right? So, like, I'll give you a real example. There's data that shows that the average buyer in America thinks, via a poll, that it takes about 15 hours to help a buyer buy a house.
15
hours. And the NAR statistics say it takes between 80 to 100 hours. So, like, take an average commission that somebody earns, divide by 15 versus divide by 100. There is a massive disconnect in value.
Huge.
Right? So where I think it's both, right? You said you've heard to explain your value, but you saying just show them. I think it's also explaining in detail, right? Like,
yeah,
if you think I earned X and you're dividing by 15, but I earned X and I'm dividing by 100, realistically, there is a massive disconnect into the level of effort, right? And so part of it is true education of like, hey, this is what I actually do. And like, having the list of 105 things that NAR, or statistically speaking, that the average agent does in a transaction. And it's being on purpose with your words. And again, I'll accept the compliment that I'm articulate, because that's something I've obsessed with my whole life. One of the things I articulate in a buyer representation presentation, so we can role play a little bit, is, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm super excited that you're qualified and we're starting this home journey buying process. There's a couple things I want to tell you. First, there is a 90+% chance that the house we ultimately write a contract and buy, you will find on the internet, on a portal, and you will send it to me. Or your parent, friend, coworker, which, by the way, are all experts in real estate going forward, and you will find out because there'll be a lot of noise, will send it to you. And that's awesome. And I'm here to facilitate that showing. But I want you to understand that 80 to 90% of the value I bring to this transaction representing you starts when we start writing the contract, right? And this is where it's important that you actually have the list of things you do, because and again, I don't think that there is much value in unlocking a door. I don't.
Never has been.
Never has been. No. But again, if I never articulate this to you, and then we have a mismatch, like, I think almost all disagreements in personal or business happen when two parties have a misalignment of responsibility and effort, right? If you have two partners and one of them is doing more of the work, but that was the deal because the one doing the work put up no money and the one doing less work put up money, that's a great partnership.
For some.
For some, it's not, right? But like, and if that were to be the case, I would say put it in writing so you can remind them in 2 or 3 years when the sweat equity is different than the capital equity, right? So I think there is a long process of even being able to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, in the last 12 months, 24 months, I've represented 14 buyers. On average, I've been able to negotiate 4.5% concessions off the average property, in addition to compensation. I'm just talking about pure concessions from list price. Isn't that a different conversation when you then ask for a fee?
100%.
Right. And this is the crazy part. Like, you already do it. You already do it. So you just need to learn to articulate. One of my favorite scripts, and again, this turns into role playing, right?
Right.
With first time home buyers is, and again, you'll laugh because this resonates. Just, as you're going through the buyer presentation and say, oh, by the way, the week of closing, this will happen. You're going to be in a super important meeting and you're going to get a 911 call or text from your lender. And they're going to ask you for something asinine, like a tax return from 7 years ago, or like a copy of the lease when you lived in college. I joke and say blood sample. And it's going to be ridiculous and inconvenient. And I want you to stop, laugh out loud, and text me, Leo can predict the future. Will you do that for me? It's statistically possible. How often will that happen? Like 80% of the time, because first-time home buyers, it's difficult to get into the loan. You add any complexity with down payments and gift letters from a parent or a loved one, like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So just predict it. And there's so many things that, again, we get desensitized. Like, hey, the settlement could get moved from Friday to Monday. Is that possible? Very possible. And did they give up their last lease and now they're literally homeless in a truck in a hotel with massive anxiety for the weekend? Like, one of the things I always did, it's like, let's make sure that it doesn't coincide. Like, you need a 2-week, 1-month window, whether it's a rent back as when I'm the listing agent, right? Because that's once you sell that house, like I always negotiate a free rent back for like 2 or 4 weeks, because it's like, I want calm and peace. And oh, by the way, it's selfish because once they move out, I want the property to have like 5-6 days where we can clean it up, make sure there's, punch out the item lists, and we don't have like furious people where it's like there's a scratch on the wall. And because you and I both know that, like, if there's something imperfect, the buyer's going to want a $10,000 escrow, which should be $87, right? And so these are the things that a professional, experienced person delivers way above. Like, the fact that in a multiple contract situation, if you ask the right questions as the buyer's agent, be like, hey, what's really important? Like, how about I give you the 30-day rent back, right? And let's say that seller's mortgage payment is $5,000. And it's like, whoa, that's real money. Like, I can save $5,000. I don't have to come up on price by $5,000. And guess what? It doesn't cost my buyer anything to give them that first 30 days because you have the 1 month skip on the first mortgage payment, right? So again, it's articulating and then being skill-based and professional-based.
You've talked about skill-based. The recent short video that you sent out talked about skill-based, tools-based, confidence-based business, right? Talk about stupid questions. I got a question. I just did exactly what you just said. I bought and sold, right? And the last question that held up the closing, I kid you not, what address do we send the mortgage bill to? We don't know that. That was the question. And I said, you're kidding me, right? No, that's what's going to hold up the closing. Oh, I swear to God, it cost me a day. Cost me a day. Anyway, so this shit always happens. You've talked about, what is your strategy going to be with your buyer? We have to talk strategies now more than we ever did. And this is where we bring value by telling them what to do, telling them what we do and how we do it, and doing the best thing for them, our fiduciary responsibility, of course, right? And to be able to have everything at our fingertips to give them what they need, including the expertise of getting answers from their questions, getting problem solved, and being able to go to the right people to get those problems, those answers. What would you say are going to be a couple of the positive things that come out of all the changes we had to make and are making?
Again, anything that nets more professionals, right? Because where I think there is always a disconnect is if you have one bad experience, right?
Right.
And we live in an echo chamber that's way more powerful now than once upon a time, right? So if somebody has a bad experience, and again, you see it all the time, like on Twitter, where if someone famous enough has a bad experience and they tweet it out, like the company responds very quickly, right? So I think my one suggestion to everybody, and I keep saying it over, is have a lot of patience and grace, right? This is not the moment for anyone to beat their chest and say, I know more than you do. And Anthony Lamacchia is a good friend of mine, and we're very much on agreement on a lot of ways forward.
He's been on the broadcast twice.
And he actually said this the other day, and I want to share this story. It's like in 2008, 2009, I saw a lot of grace between agents in where hey, the lender who was closing the loan just shut down over the weekend. Literally, like the FDIC took them over. They went out of business. Yeah, let's move the closing by 2 weeks and let's cooperate in helping you find a lender both on the listing and the buy side to get that person into a house, because this young family already gave up their lease. They're in a moving truck with 2 small kids that need to go to school next week. Being an asshole and taking their deposit and getting litigious is not helpful right now.
Exactly. Right.
So that was an interesting moment in very dark days in both our industry and our economy and our country, where people were committing suicide, right? Because their financial situation was so bad and they lost everything and were being kicked out of homes. Yeah. So that was actually a bright moment where I saw agents having a lot of grace and empathy and helping and not being, confrontational. And I'm imploring everybody to do the same, right? This is not the moment to be like, well, you can't buy the house, and if we don't get this, it's my way or the highway. It's and I'm telling our agents and other agents, listen, if we're unsure, let's just call the brokers. Let's get some people. I have been taking calls at all hours of the day and night on weekends, trying to work through things hey, there's your state form says this, either use that form and say that, or let's modify our form to be more reflective in that state. And that's how we get to the other side. If your North Star is helping families get into their next home, and that is your obsession, that's how you do the right thing.
So, Leo, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. We're getting about on time, and as I put up this comment, I'm feeling more stressed and less cooperation than ever in our market. Unfortunately, I think that's something we're going to see, and that is going to get better, I hope. I just want to, again, thank you for coming on. Is there any last words you'd like to give to people who are feeling that way?
Yeah, this too shall pass.
Awesome. Hey, man, thank you so much.
And again, just I'll say one more thing. If go to any moment in your history, and again, let's leave catastrophic personal loss out of it, because then that all bets are off. But whatever kept you up at night 5 years ago in business, literally doesn't bother you anymore, right? Think of the most horrible business experience, even if it was 2008 and you lost everything, you were lost your home, basically couch surfing, because a lot of people who are in business and in real estate had traumatic experiences. But it made you stronger. It made if you chose to get back up and fight another day in that business. And so this shall pass. And normally I just go to is my family safe? Do we have food? Do we have a roof over our head? Right. This too shall pass.
Hey, man, I want to thank you. I think I consider myself extremely fortunate because I get to be in business with you on a regular basis, and I appreciate that. And I love what I do. I love where I do it, and have a leader like you is second to none. But I got 2 more things, and we'll be done. One is I don't know how you answer this question, but how do I help you grow your business and grow our business?
Yeah. So again, this is where it'll sound self-serving, but there's a lot of folks that aren't sure what to do. They don't have leadership. They don't, and fairly and unfairly, they don't have the infrastructure and the way to they don't have the legal resources we have and the breadth of leaders with a lot of experience, so we can rapidly spend money and expand and build tool sets and consult the biggest attorneys in the country for antitrust and that kind of stuff. So, where I always say, like, look, if there's somebody struggling, if there's an independent broker watching this who's got 50, 100, 200 agents, and they still love pouring into people and they still love leading people, we're a platform that allows you to plug into our system, let Dave know, and we can have a one-on-one conversation of what it could look like.
Well, thank you for that, man. Hey, look, just like everybody else, there's a hat coming your way, man. Everybody comes on a broadcast, gets a nice RE Skill Builder hat. I'll be sending this out to you. We've got another great broadcast coming next week. Leo, thank you so much for coming on. I get the opportunity to hope to see you in person in Miami shortly. And
that's open to anybody. EXPCon is coming, and I look forward to hanging out with everybody.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And Leo, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for being on. Pete, George, Keith, Lisa, Caroline, thank you for being on and commenting today. Thanks so much. We'll see you real soon. And Leo, just stay on for a second as we go off. Hit it, Nelson.